Magandang araw sa inyong lahat. Today, let's talk about something that is in the news. This morning, lumabas ang estimates ng Philippine GDP growth performance. Anong sinabi nila? For 2025, ang growth performance natin for the year was 4.4%. Because last 3 months of the year, the growth performance was only 3%. And for the third quarter of the year, it was 3.9% versus over 5.5% in the first and second quarters of the year. So that was 4.4% for 2025. And I think last year's growth was 5.7%. Okay. You know what GDP is? Well, just in case you don't know what GDP is the value of all the final goods and services produced in our country in a given period of time. We measure it in quarterly and we measure it yearly. So all goods and services. Naturally, when the country grows, that means the value of goods and services that we produce in the economy grows. So that's what GDP is. It's very important. It's a very important metric. The second question is, how did we perform compared to our neighbors and compared to what our government targeted? Kung we're doing that, well, compared to what our government targeted, talagang lagpak tayo. Why? Because the government's target for GDP for 2025 was originally 6.5% to 8%. Then they changed it to 6 to 7%. Then in December, last month lang, they changed it to 5.5% to 6.5%. Diyos ko naman. And still, we failed because 4.4% lang ang performance. How did we compare? How did we perform compared to our neighbors? There are only two countries that I've seen, our neighboring countries that I've seen with growth performances. Indonesia, it grew by 5% in 2025. And Vietnam, are you ready for this? Vietnam grew by 8% in 2025. And we face the same, foreign problems and foreign issues. So, okay. So, compared to what our government targeted, compared to our neighbors, we performed very badly. Ngayon, ang tanong, bakit? Why did we perform so badly? Let me tell you what the government said in the person of Secretary Balisacan of the Department of Economy, Planning and Development, or DepDev. Formerly NEDA ito. Okay. Sabi niya, if public construction could have been flat, in other words, if public construction did not go down so much, our GDP in 2025 would have actually increased from 4.4% to 5.5%. So, to public construction, to what has happened to public construction, he attributes the slowdown of the economy. I'm just talking about what he said. I'm not saying what I think. In other words, sabi niya, the sharp contraction of public construction because of the corruption scandal contributed to something like 1.1 percentage points, to the decline. So, does that sound to you like nag-stop yung public construction because nag-skandalo tayo with respect to flood control? That's very hard to swallow. Because flood control projects are a relatively small part. The major part of public infrastructure are roads, bridges, foreign assisted projects, etc. That's the major part. So just because we looked at flood control projects, nawalaan tayo ng 1.1%, that doesn't sound right. Right? That doesn't sound correct. Why? did public construction funds go down, funding go down? It was not because of the investigation. It was because the Department of Public Works and the other infrastructure programs of government, natakot sila. Yung they did not they became like suspended animation. Natatakot silang mag-sign ng mga vouchers. Baka sila maimbestiga. But that is something that the government could have prevented. There was no reason. I don't think there's any reason, unless, of course, the Department of Public Works will tell me. There was no reason to stop all infrastructure while we are investigating flood control. As of now, we're only investigating flood control. It's not the scandal that caused the freeze in public construction funding. It was the government who froze public construction funding because parang hindi sila makalakad and chew gum at the same time. If they're going to lakad, they better stop chewing gum. That cannot be. That is that may not show corruption, but that certainly shows inefficiency. Is it not? So, tapos na yan. I don't quite agree with what Secretary Balisacan says. But then, Secretary Balisacan said something else that's very interesting. Ang sabi niya, actually, we need this decline. In other words, the country needed to have slowed down. Does that mean that he is excusing the ineptitude of our government officials in carrying on with infrastructure? By the way, it was not only infrastructure. I understand that in several provinces, salaries and wages could not be paid because there was a general slowdown in government performance. They all got scared. Is it because they're guilty? I don't know. But the fact is, government performance slowed down, and it was not necessary to slow down that government performance because of these investigations. If that is the case, we better not investigate anymore. Hindi ba? It brings to mind how the Duterte government reacted to the COVID pandemic. Do you know that the Philippines grew slower than most countries in the world in the pandemic? And that is not because of the pandemic. That's because of how the Duterte government reacted to that pandemic. That is clear. All the data show it, that the Philippines was one of the slowest growers in the pandemic compared to Thailand, compared to Indonesia, compared to Vietnam especially. So that's it. I hope you know what I'm saying, mga kapatid. I'm saying there was a flood control scandal. It should have been investigated. It was investigated. But what the government did during that investigation was, to say the least, quite ineffective, and to say the worst, very dangerous for our economy. I had people come to me telling me about their experiences with government after the flood control scandal came out. The government froze payments to everybody in the infrastructure business, not just to the flood control, froze to everybody. There was a contractor who came to me saying that he had not been paid by the government since October last year, and he was not the only one. So that's what stopped the construction. It was not the flood control scandal itself, it was government's reaction to it. That's what I mean. So having said that and having proven my point, I want to now bring you back to what Secretary Balisacan said. Secretary Balisacan is a good friend of mine, but I have to bring this up. Secretary Balisacan said, actually, sabi ng chief economist natin we better have a slowdown. Why? because this slowdown will allow us to correct the problems, build the trust of our people in the institutions, in the government. How has this slowdown corrected our problems? In fact, the slowdown has made it more difficult for the Filipinos to live, is it not? Then he said, it will build the trust of our people in our institutions. Has your trust in our Congress, the House of Representatives, increased? Has your trust in our Senate increased? Has your trust in the executive increased? I don't think so. Tignan natin ang nangyari. Yung ICI budget, nung Setyembre pa sila na-form. Dumating yung budget nila, Disyembre. Ganito ba ang dapat gawin para ma-increase yung trust natin sa ating gobyerno? Parang ini-small nila, no? Ang ilang bang kongresista ang kinasuhan because of this? Nothing yet. Ilang bang senador ang kinasuhan because of this? Isa lang, a former senator pa. So that's what I mean. If this slowdown was meant to increase the public trust in government and in institutions, I'm sorry it has not done so. So let me summarize what has happened. Philippine economic growth has slowed down. It shows very poor performance compared to our targets, the government's targets, and compared to the performance of other countries, number one. Number two, the Philippine government, through our Secretary of Development, said that actually that slowdown would have not occurred if the government's expenditures on infrastructure had remained the same, had remained flat. All right. Then he said that this slowdown was necessary to correct the problems, build the trust of our people in the institutions, in the government. So, question for us, mga anak, mga kapatid, etc. Did that slowdown build our trust in our institutions and in the government? Did our slowdown correct the problems of corruption? What do you think?